Hello, Buckeye fans, and welcome to another episode of the Bucknuts Happy Hour. I am Patrick Murphy here with you, and we are going to talk Buckeyes this week. We are going to talk Washington this week. We are going to talk the trip from Ohio State to Washington for the Buckeyes' first Big Ten game of the year, the first road game of the season for the Buckeyes. And we're going to have two special guests on today, which I will get to in a moment. Before we get going, if you're watching this on YouTube, please turn on alerts. Hit that thumbs up button, hit the bell for notifications. Make sure you get all of our video content, including these podcasts and our interviews throughout the season. If you're listening to this on your podcast platform of choice, please leave a 5-star review, comments, all of that. It is all very helpful for us. And we're going back to the well. It was a good off week, good week 3 with a few seltzers. So we're going to stick with it. It's actually feels kind of like Seattle weather here in Columbus today, but we're hanging on to summer. We're going to enjoy some more seltzers here with a mango White Claw during this Bucknuts Happy Hour. All right, so our guest this week, we are going to be joined first by one of my colleagues, Kim Grinolds of Dawgman, the 247 Sports podcast, 247 Sports Washington site. He is going to join to talk with us about the Huskies, what he's seen so far this season, what he expects from the atmosphere, the stadium, everything about this weekend, maybe what fans traveling out there should expect as well. And then we have a special guest that I'm excited about, and that is CBS's Gary Danielson, who will be on the call for this game. He will join the Bucknuts Happy Hour to discuss what's going on, in the build-up to this game, how he sees the Buckeyes so far this year, how he sees Washington, and maybe some other insights. So cheers to them, and let's get this rolling. And now on the Bucknuts Happy Hour, we turn our attention to this week's game between Ohio State and Washington. And to do so, we bring in someone who knows a thing or two about the Husky program. Kim Grinolds, the co-founder, I believe, of Dawgman, the 247 Sports Washington site. Kim, how you doing?
You guys have happy hour. You guys do it right.
Oh yeah, I get a little drink here, and we cheers. We don't go too crazy, but it's also we're recording this at 3:30 our time, so it's a little bit later here in Columbus.
I was talking to Dave earlier this morning, and it's just kind of crazy. Bucknuts has been around for so long, and we started in 1997. Way back in the day. So, and I know Steve has been around a long time, and you guys have as well. So there's certain names that you remember that you go way back to when we were in our infancy, and some of you guys are still around, and you guys are still around. You haven't died yet.
Nope, not yet.
They tried to kill. How many times have they tried to kill us, Dave?
Pat. Plenty. That actually takes me into my first question, because I got asked recently, because I do this, and I usually have someone who covers the opposing team, and I do our written question thing, which I'll have out with Chris later this week. But I got a message from one of our longtime users on the Bucknuts message board that said, like, I don't know who all these people are, especially with the expanding conferences. Can you intro them a little bit better? So, Kim, I'm going to let you do it. How did you get into this? Kind of tell the Bucknuts listeners, a little bit about yourself and how the site got going.
Well, it's kind of crazy because you tend to fall into things, and a lot of people out there, the jobs that they have, it's just kind of unexpected. And back in the day, and you may be too young for this, but back in the day before the internet got big, it was Prodigy, CompuServe, and AOL. And a guy named Dave Samick was running AKA Dawgman, was just running a little message board on Prodigy. It was $10 a month, and he was covering recruiting. Nobody covered recruiting, especially on something like this. You'd get Sports Washington, Jim Heckman's magazine. You would get that, once a month, and usually the information was outdated. And, so I was doing that quite diligently and met Dave, and I just kind of looked at him and casually said, "You ever thought about doing this as a business and making money?" And he said, "Let's have lunch." And that's how it started, and just fell into it. If I wouldn't have said that, what would have happened, So, but we go way back, 1997. We are on our 8th coaching staff since our inception. So hopefully Jed Fish is here for a few more years. Just keep an eye on that Florida job. He's a Florida alum. If Billy Napier gets fired down there, Jed Fish is probably going to be at the top of their list. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens there. We are, God, are we going to hit 10 before we close this thing down? We'll see.
I hadn't thought about that. I was talking to people earlier this week about Jed Fish, and they were talking about what a great fit this is for Washington and things like that. And it didn't occur to me that he went to Florida and
Steve Spurrier fan, just that's his mentor.
All right, interesting. Well, I'm pretty sure he'll be the coach on Saturday, so we shouldn't have to worry about it by then. Let's go into this matchup. What do you think is the biggest advantage for Washington? Because I think most Buckeye fans know kind of where the Buckeyes stand on things, but where do you think maybe Washington has some advantages in this matchup?
Well, first thing, home field advantage. Husky Stadium, it's the second longest winning streak in the country. I think it's 22 games. They've got wins over Michigan. They've got wins over USC. They've got a lot of big-time wins at Husky Stadium, and it's very, very difficult to play. Pat, you've been around. You've been to a lot of stadiums, and so have I. I've been to Autzen Stadium down in Eugene. I've been to Ohio State. I've been to Michigan. I've been to Florida, LSU, Notre Dame, Penn State for a whiteout. I've been to a lot of different stadiums. And while they're all loud, Washington is different. They have more seats between the goal lines than any stadium in the country. So you don't have that big end zone like you go to Nebraska, and their end zones are huge. And you go to Washington, and most of the seats are between the goal lines. And then you take a look at the two sides of the stands where the roof lines, we call them the jaws. And those jaws don't go straight out. They're actually tilted down, and it just pushes the noise down. While these other stadiums are loud, Washington is a different level of loud because a lot of those open air stadiums, the sound just goes outside the stadium. This goes up. How is Julian Sayin going to handle that kind of noise as a first-time starter on the road? I think that's going to be the key question. And that 12th man that's going to be at Husky Stadium, I think, could be a game changer. And then the other thing is, I'm not sure that you face a quarterback that is like DeMonde Williams. He's special. He's not very big. He's not very big at all. He's 5'9"-ish, maybe 5'10", but he's not real thick. When you take a look at Russell Wilson, for example, Russell's thick. He's built like a running back. He's really thick, and he's got a really high release, so he can get the ball over the lineman. But when you take a look at DeMonde Williams, he's pretty slight, but he's electric. He runs a 4.3, and he's got a strong arm. So him breaking down a defense when a play breaks down and him rushing out of the pocket, and those defensive linemen are scrambling all over the place, they're going to get gassed. So that's where the depth for Ohio State's defensive line could come into play as well.
Yeah, Matt Patricia last week during the off week, when he was asked about Washington, compared DeMonde Williams to Kyler Murray, which he's not the only one that's used that comparison. But I think especially Kyler Murray, if you think back to Oklahoma, not maybe what he's done with the Arizona Cardinals, an Heisman Trophy winner, right? So not a bad comparison. I know when I watched the first game of the season a few weeks ago, he just jumped off the screen. I mean, he was that type of player for me. And I assume it will be even more so in person. He's got some weapons around him, though. What should Buckeye fans know about the rest of the offense?
Well, first of all, take a look at that running back, number 1, Jonah Williams. Yes. You've heard bowling ball, fire hydrant. I mean, Jonah's not as tall as DeMonde, but man, he's 230 pounds. And I was talking to the guys earlier today on the sideline over in Pullman last week. He came running out of bounds and missed me by about 3 feet going full bore. And all I could think is, well, what do you do with that? I mean, what do you do with that? Because he's running low and he's small anyways, but his lower body, I could just imagine getting hit with a knee in the ear hole by Jonah Coleman. So he's not only a real physical runner, he can get outside, but he's really improved his pass catching ability. He's their second leading receiver as we go into this game. So he's become a threat in the screen game. They put him in motion, and with the first 2 games that Washington's had, how much of the offense have they really shown? So keep it, Jonah's going to jump off the charts. Their backup running back is Adam Muhammad. And if I look like Adam Muhammad, he's 6'1", 230 pounds. If I look like Adam Muhammad, I'd never wear a shirt. I would not have a shirt. I wouldn't have a shirt. I would just go maybe a vest, maybe.
Okay.
But he's a big time guy, and you'll see him back returning kicks. Jonah and Adam Muhammad will be running kicks, and then they've got a dynamic receiver in Denzel Boston. He's 6'4", 210 pounds, huge catch radius, really good physical blocker in the run game. And, those are three guys, with the quarterback, the running back, and the wide receiver in Denzel Boston. Those are all guys that do have NFL futures ahead of them. So those are the three guys that are going to jump off the chart at you. And by the way, Damon Williams, he's only 19. He just turned 19 a few months ago. Do you remember when you were 19?
Vaguely.
I was such an idiot when I was 19 years old. I was just scary, but 19 years old, I just shake my head at that kid.
Right. What about the offensive line play? Because those weapons only work. I know Williams can run around, but he's going to need the protection. The running back's going to need holes to run through. What have you seen from them? I know the competition hasn't been quite what they'll see Saturday, but how do you feel about what they've got up front?
Well, I think it's quite a bit better than last year. And I joked earlier this morning, what I equated the offensive line Jed Fish had to put together and the roster he had to put together last year was like going to Walmart at 8:00 on Christmas Eve, going Christmas shopping and going, where is everything? There just wasn't a lot. They've definitely upgraded. It's nowhere near the same offensive line that they had, even so some of the faces are familiar. The left tackle is a grad transfer in from Kansas State in Carver Willis, and he's graded out really well on PFF. The entire Washington offensive line is actually graded out pretty well. The guy to kind of keep an eye on, if there's a weak spot, I would kind of, not because of talent, the kid's going to be a monster, but number 72, John Mills at left guard. I expect him to be a freshman All-American. He's a big human, very, very big. He's still young, and you just, putting a first-year player, freshman, in against a team like Ohio State, it'll be interesting to see how he does with the limited experience he has. But he's graded out pretty well. Landon Hatchett was one of the highest-rated centers coming out of high school. He's a true center. His brother transferred from Oklahoma, and Garen Hatchett. And then at right tackle, they've got a big guy as well, and Drew Azzopardi. He's a transfer from San Diego State, who kind of had a rough year last year, but has made huge, huge strides over last year. So the offensive line has actually played better than I anticipated. And then in addition, they've got a very big tight end in Quentin Moore, who's about 6'5", 6'6", about 250 pounds. And Jed Fish says he's the best blocking tight end he's ever had. So that offensive line with Washington, haven't been tested. We'll find out.
All right.
And if it does break down, they got a guy back there who can break down the play.
Right.
Anyways.
Yeah. We might have a matchup of two top blocking tight ends because Ohio State tight end coach Keenan Bailey called Will Kazmarek the best blocking tight end in the country. I don't know if that's necessarily true, but he's definitely good. So we'll see how that plays out. Not that they will go head to head, but
right.
You need some of those guys. Defensive side of the ball, I know there's been some injuries. Who do you think is going to miss this game, and what kind of impact do they have if they're not out there?
Well, the two guys that are on the injury list, number one is Takario Davis, and he's an NFL corner. I mean, both corners at Washington are NFL prospects. Takario, probably the higher rated of them, and he transferred in this year from Arizona. Ephesian Pricesock transferred in last year. Both of those are 6'4". Those are big physical corners. And Takario warmed up last week for the Washington State game. They didn't play him. I don't know how much of that. He didn't look like anything was wrong with him, but didn't look like they really needed him anyways. But I'd be surprised if Takario Davis doesn't play. I'd be really surprised. The other guy I think is even more key because their linebacking depth isn't great. That's maybe the weak link on the defense is their linebackers, but Tariq Al-Ukta, he's a transfer from Washington State, and he's just a tackling machine. Every good defense has that guy at linebacker that's going to lead the team in tackles. It's always around the ball that just makes stuff happen. And Buddha's built like Jonah Coleman. He's about 5'10" and 230 pounds, but he's always around the ball. He was on crutches post game last week after the game at Washington State. And when we asked Jed Fish about it, the only thing he would say is not good. Now, he since said that that's going to be a game time decision where I'm really thinking that you'll see Takario Davis at corner. I'd be surprised if you see Buddha, Tariq Al-Ukta. I'd be really surprised if we see him. Anytime you're on crutches, it's not good. But I remember back in the day, one of Washington's running backs on Thursday was in a boot, and he played and ran for 150 yards on Saturdays. So you never know what these coaches are up to, especially when it comes to injuries.
Yeah, definitely
you never know.
Definitely not. That stood out to me. You mentioned the size of the cornerbacks, and I think I asked Ryan Day about it this week. What kind of advantage can that be when you're going up against Ohio State's receivers, who are big receivers but not huge, talented, no doubt about it? But how do you see maybe that matchup using that size against the talent of the Buckeyes wideouts?
I don't know if it's a matter of the size. I mean, they're just real physical. When they started the game against Washington State, they were playing a pretty soft zone and they were giving up a lot of passing yards. And then they finally said enough is enough. And they went to a more aggressive, type defense where they were running press coverage a lot more and, blitzing a little bit more. But I'm sure you're familiar with Ryan Walters, the defensive coordinator at Washington. He was at Purdue. He was at Illinois. He's really highly thought of. And the entire time, these 3 games, we've always felt, okay, he's not showing everything. He's just not. So that's where, when it comes to talent-wise, I think, Ohio State definitely has a talent edge, and it's not a small gap. I'd say it's a good-sized gap on talent level. So you have to think, with Ryan Walters, is he a good enough coach to scheme to improve this defense? Because they're really lacking in some areas, but we'll see what Ryan Walters has up his sleeves. And, is he going to play that soft zone? Is he going to be more aggressive? Are we going to see, some tricks? So that's kind of what we're looking forward to, because I'm not sure that I think we have a good idea what to expect out of the Washington offense. Defensively, I don't think any of us are really sure what's going to happen. It may be the same thing as what we saw, but I just have a sneaking suspicion there's some stuff he hasn't shown yet that you'll see on Saturday.
Yeah, I'm interested. I know there's been, he's played a decent amount of man in his time as a defensive coordinator. Ohio State has eaten some man defense up in recent years with some of these receivers. So yeah, I will be intrigued to see what he has cooked up. Obviously, he's somewhat familiar with Ryan Day and this scheme, so to speak. Going off the field, what are the vibes like in Seattle and across Washington fans right now? Obviously, you come off a national championship game appearance 2 years ago, the bad season last year, 3-0 start. Now you've got the number 1 team in the country coming in. How do people feel about this program and this game?
Mariners made the playoffs. I mean, it's turned into a Mariner town this past week.
You were there, right? You went last night.
No, I'm going tonight.
Oh, you're going tonight. Okay, that's right.
They clinched the playoff position last night, and they can clinch the division tonight.
Okay.
But it's interesting. I think the vibe is good. I think that there's a cautious optimism. I don't know if you saw Rick Neuheisel this morning on CBS Sports. He predicted Washington to defeat Ohio State. I'm not willing to go that far. I think that's a much of a stretch. But the vibe is, when you hire a new coach, unless it's a big name, it's just wait and see. Show me. And I think when Jed Fish got hired, especially after the success that Kalen DeBoer had, was show me. I'm not sure the show me has worn off yet. It could this weekend. I don't know if that's fair or not.
Yeah.
So they beat Michigan last year, but Michigan wasn't that good last year.
Yeah. Yeah. You were talking with me before we started recording about how to get down to the stadium, the rail and things like that. What do Buckeye fans need to know? I know some have probably made the trip out there in 2007, maybe some even before then. But what should they know about around the stadium and things like that?
There's not really bars or anything like that anywhere close. I mean, you're probably a mile away going out to U Village, but those going to the game on the light rail, you can actually go from SeaTac Airport and take the light rail all into Husky Stadium. And that light rail station at Husky Stadium you're there. I mean, you're 50 feet from the stadium is where you get off. So the light rail is kind of cool. there's not a lot of places. The tailgating there is unreal when you start going down towards the water and you see what's going on with the boats. And Husky fans in general, if you're cool, they're cool. If you're wearing Oregon colors, you're probably not as safe. But no, I think that you'll be well taken care of, and it's a cool place. And when the schedule comes out, I'm sure you do the same as me. You're looking at those road trips,
right?
And the people I've talked to, we always looked forward to going down to Arizona. We don't get to go to Arizona anymore. We always looked forward to going to the Bay Area. We don't get to do that anymore. Boulder, Colorado was always fun. And I'm sure that the media and the fans in the Big Ten, when they see that away schedule and they see Washington, I'm sure that's one that they circle. So I'm expecting actually a pretty good showing from Ohio State fans. Ohio State, Michigan, Purdue, Northwestern, all of these Big Ten schools seem to have a nice alumni base here in the city of Seattle. So every time one of those schools comes out, they seem to have a pretty good showing, and I expect that from Ohio State as well.
Yeah, I've talked to a number of Buckeye fans over the last few weeks that are going out. So I imagine there will be a good crowd. There was a good crowd out at Oregon last year. So like you said, not only do they travel well, but they also have alumni bases out west that don't always get to see their Buckeyes. So this has been
choose a road game, Washington or West Lafayette. Choose one.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Washington or Iowa. Choose one.
Nope, you're winning that one.
Nebraska?
Maybe if you just want to see the stadium and be treated really well. I think maybe Rutgers, maybe Maryland, just because the cities around them.
Yeah.
Even Penn State with everything they've got with the whiteouts and whatnot. There's not much around that campus, let me tell you. So
no, there's a lot to do. I'm an East Side guy, so I'm not big on downtown Seattle, but I think that's pretty much the same in any big metropolitan city. But East Side's actually pretty nice. That's where all the tech corridor is, and that's the newer part of the Seattle area. But there's some pretty cool areas in Seattle, Ballard, West Seattle, and the like. But Seattle's a cool place to come to.
You mentioned Rick Neuheisel and making that prediction. What would this mean if Washington's able to pull up the upset and beat Ohio State, beat the number one team, keep that home winning streak alive, and obviously a 4-0 start to the season?
Well, you start to head into a different part of the schedule where their next game would be back at Maryland, and Maryland, had a nice win. That may not be easy, but then they come home against Rutgers. So all of a sudden, you would be looking at a team that is what would that be? If they won 3 games in a row, that would make them 6-0. And I'm sure that would make them a top 15 team. So, it would mean a lot to the program. They've invested a lot of money since Jed Fish came here. When Kalen DeBoer left, everybody thought that this was going to be a dynasty up here. And when Kalen left, it was just a lot of guys transferred out. A lot of guys went to the NFL. The recruiting changed. A lot of guys decommitted. So Jed Fish basically had to start from scratch again. And he's done a nice job of building it back up. So, his name's going to be mentioned when there's a job openings. His name's going to be mentioned specifically for that Florida job. So we'll see. But Husky football is a big deal here. I mean, the Mariners are taking over right now, but that's because they haven't been to the playoffs forever. But it would be huge for the program, and maybe. And I talked to the guys before, when we were back at Media Day, just Washington joining the Big Ten, we still seem like the new guy who's just showed up to high school. Who is this guy? Who are these guys? And I'm not sure that Washington is really that well known to a lot of people in the Big Ten. They're familiar with the name, but not really familiar with Washington. So I think it would be a huge deal for Washington to set a precedent if they were to beat Ohio State, and I think it would open up some eyes.
All right, Kim. Well, thank you very much for coming on the Bucknuts Happy Hour. I know it's always a busy week, so I appreciate when people take time to do this. And I'll see you out there in Seattle on Saturday.
You'll see me, Chris Fetter, Scott Eklund, Monica Samick is going to be there. So nice. we got a full crew. So anything you guys need, just let us know. Are you going to go to the Mariners game on Friday night? You were talking about maybe doing that.
Yeah, we're talking about it. My hope is that you get to see them clinch the division tonight and those ticket prices come down a little bit.
Well, they're playing the Dodgers. So they're playing the Dodgers.
Yeah, I know. I had a couple of the other guys who were on the beat found tickets for $58 and jumped on those. I probably should have done that with them because it's all up to like 120 or something right now. So we'll see. Probably going to go. I've not been out there before, and it seems like a cool opportunity to go see that stadium.
Yeah, stadium's really cool. I think it's one of the best in baseball. And the thing of it is, it's 25 years old. It's still like it's brand new. They've taken really good care of it. It's a cool stadium, especially. I don't know if the roof will have to close or not. Probably not. And by the way, you keep on looking at the weather report. Now we got a 35% chance of rain on Saturday, so we'll see. But you'll be up in the press box. I'll be down getting soaked.
Well, if Columbus is any indication for Buckeye fans, it's been gray and rainy all week, so they're getting used to what it will be like in Seattle.
It's a wet cold in Seattle. Just remember that.
All right. Well, thanks again, Kim. I appreciate you coming on.
All right, thanks.
All right. Thanks again to Kim for coming on to the Bucknuts Happy Hour. Again, he is the co-founder of Dawgman, the 247Sports site for Washington. They do a great job over there. But we are now going to turn our attention to, we'll still focus on this game, but a bit different topic. We're going to look at things from a more national perspective, bringing in Gary Danielson from CBS Sports, who will call this game on Saturday. Excited to talk to Gary. He's someone I have listened to call games for a long time, and he will be, as I said, on the call for this. So he has a good perspective on this, college football, both teams. So we'll talk with Gary. And if it looks a little different, if you're watching on YouTube, it's because through CBS, we had to record this on Zoom. So I had to kind of finagle this together. So it's not our normal platform. So it will look a little bit different. If you're listening to this on your podcast, everything will sound just the same. Let's get to Gary. And now we welcome in CBS's Gary Danielson to the Bucknuts Happy Hour. Gary, you get to call this game between Washington and Ohio State this week. First of all, I guess, thanks for joining us. Second,
my pleasure.
What are you looking forward to with this game?
How about a good old-fashioned, rough, close Big Ten football game? And have respect for both the teams. Really love what Jed is doing at Washington. He's already proven he could do it as a head coach. He waited many years, kind of toiling as a, assistant coach all over the country, and got his shot at Arizona. Did a great job there, and then the opportunity at Washington. It's a really good spot, I think, to compete for the Big Ten championship. He'll get good players there. Ohio State speaks for itself. When I was coming out of high school in the 60s, Woody was still the head coach at Ohio State. Bo was the head coach at Michigan. So not much has changed over the 50 years since I started watching this stuff.
Let me ask you this, and I'm sure this is a question you've gotten, and this doesn't necessarily pertain to this game, but you guys spent so long covering the SEC and doing those games down there, the 3:30 games. I remember watching those.
Right.
Then you move over to the Big Ten last year. How much of a change was that with new teams, not only new teams for you guys calling the games, but also new teams coming to the conference that I'm sure you were familiar with, but not maybe as closely as you'd watch some of the SEC teams over the years?
Yeah, I think you're right. The X's and O's of the game is where I try to stay. But when you're in a league, and that's one of the reasons I chose to go to the SEC conference in 2006. When I was covering college football with Brent Musburger in 2005 all the way to 2000, I think for 7 years, we were going all over. We were doing a Pac-12 game. We were doing a Big 12 game. We were doing an ACC game. Then we'd do 2 Big 10 games. Just felt like I really wasn't familiar, trying to cover 50 or 60 teams, maybe 70 teams. It's hard to do them justice. The NFL, you could just concentrate on those guys that So I was really looking forward to just covering one conference. And you can see a guy come in as a freshman and grow. And that's when teams were building their programs. Now it's different. I mean, players are jumping all over everywhere, so I think we're all in the same boat. But those were good years in the SEC. I knew all along that they were going to take a step up. A lot of football players in the South. It's the place to play college football right now. But, Ohio State and Michigan and Penn State, they always could compete. It's up to the rest of the conference to get a little bit better and step up to that level of football.
Have you seen that evolution of the Big Ten, especially with these teams like Washington. I know they didn't have the greatest first year,
Yeah.
or what they were able to do last year. Plus some of the, Illinois, Indiana last week playing. Have you seen the Big Ten maybe not quite get to the SEC level, but start to elevate, like you're saying?
I have. And I think that was the challenge when I took the job. The first year we only did a couple preseason games. Last year we did the whole season. And I got asked the question all the time. And I said, listen, the SEC is not coming back. I mean, they're good. They're going to stay good. In the South, they still have spring football. College football is more a way of life in the South, much like Columbus with the way they adore their Ohio State Buckeyes. There's 12, 14 teams like that in the SEC, where the North, a little bit more pro football-ish. I grew up in Michigan. I grew up a Lion fan, not necessarily a college football fan. And I think that still is a little bit different. However, the Big Ten has accepted the challenge. And the next step now has to happen. I think everyone in college football now concedes. 4 years ago, they didn't. That the top of the Big Ten, the Oregon, Penn State, Ohio State, and Michigan can compete with anybody in the SEC. And I think everybody in the SEC would agree with that. It's the middle of the pack that now has to take that next step. Can Iowa sustain and get back to where they were? Could this IU thing with Kurt Signetti be real? Remember, Washington had a bad year last year, but the year before that, they were in the national championship. So they needed to rebuild. I think the key to the conference for the Big Ten, and I said it 2 years ago, and I still maintain this, USC is the school that the Big Ten needs for them. There's always going to be another team. Purdue every once in a while, Michigan State every once in a while. Last year was IU, might be Iowa, might be Wisconsin. But if USC becomes that fifth major power, I think that's big for the Big Ten.
Let's look at these two teams a little bit. Ohio State obviously off to a great start, the win against Texas week 1, but still a relatively inexperienced team outside of some of the names that came back from last year. Who's maybe jumped out at you coming into this week that you did not know as much about player-wise?
Oh, kind of knew most of these players, to tell you the truth. But I just think Arvell Reese has gotten to be now, he is just typical Buckeye middle linebacker that we've seen all along. I think the tight end play has gotten to be elite now. I mean, you can probably go 3 deep at that position. I think Julian's doing a great job. He's a little bit out of the framework of what Ohio State's been doing, more back to CJ Stroud. He's just kind of more of a pocket passer, not in the Urban Meyer and even what they did last year with Will Howard, where there was that extra runner. And I think that's going to be the key to how this team goes, just how elite can say and stay all year. He's got great wide receivers. We knew that. By the way, the running backs, replacing the 2 running backs, I'm not surprised. They've been doing this since, 92, and there's always a running back at Ohio State, so I'm not surprised, but it is a nice handoff because those 2 guys, Travion and Quinshawn, were very, very good players. And I think the Buckeye fans will really, if they look closely, I think Jonah Coleman, the tailback for Washington, reminds me of Travion a lot. He runs quick and low to the ground, and watch him block. I mean, I did 3 Ohio State games, I think, last year, and I was always impressed how the 2 running backs complemented each other, and especially the way Henderson blocked when he was called upon. And that's a lot what Jonah Coleman is doing for Washington. But I guess the word is just typical but the biggest difference, it goes back to 2 years ago, inexperience at quarterback. And one of the things that played out last year in the playoffs was experience at quarterback mattered when it got to the playoffs. Notre Dame, Ohio State. If you didn't have experience, you struggled. I think that's the key still for this Ohio State team.
On the defensive side of the ball, you touched on Arvell Reese. Caleb Downs is a name everybody I talk to, they rave about what he's done. I still find myself sitting in the press box sometimes just watching him. As you've covered this game, you played this game, all this, Does he remind you of anybody? Is he that unique? What
Yeah.
do you think when you look at Caleb?
He's a bigger honey badger. Remember from
Yeah.
LSU, the playmaker for LSU that made, Minka Fitzpatrick was much like that when he played at Alabama, just making plays all over the field, even though he was a half corner, half slot cover player. I know Caleb is just so cerebral as a player. That's what's surprising. Even his first year at Alabama, we had him. He played the same way he's playing now. He seems to be who I heard one commentator say it. He was a chess player for Coach Knowles last year. He could put them all over, and he almost revolutionized the defense by putting him almost into a linebacker, safety, middle of the field player where he was helping on both sides. I think that kind of tweaked to the defense towards the end of the year, really helped this Buckeye defense through the playoffs. But what stands out to me is just the energy he plays with. I mean, and the fact that he seems, what did somebody call him? It wasn't just a chess player. I think they called him, it's like having 12 men on the defense because he just seems to know where the play is going, and Ohio State never gets overloaded because he always seems to be able to adjust and be that extra safety, whether it's need to fill in the line or drop back and intercept the pass. He really is an amazing football player.
This will obviously be the Buckeyes' first road test, first Big Ten game. It'll be my first trip to Husky Stadium, but everybody I talk to talks about the atmosphere there.
Yeah.
What kind of challenge are the Buckeyes walking into, and especially given some of that inexperience that we talked about earlier?
Yeah, it was my first start as a college quarterback too on the road in a game that, outside of the Big Ten. That was a trip for me. It was great. Right? We scored, and I think we lost 35-32 or so. We took the lead with 1:50 to go, and Sonny Six Killer brought them back and beat us at the gun, but it is a great setting. The fans are really into it. You don't want to look around. Sometimes you go to a golf course and the first 5 or 6 holes, you're just staring at all the beauty around you. You got to be careful to zero in between the lines. I've done many games there as a broadcaster before. I love going there. This is a pretty good team. They're a little bit nicked on defense. We'll see how they hang up there. But on offense, they haven't played the greatest competition, but on counter that, Ohio State has not played on the road against good competition. They've got their games at home. Texas was good competition, but this will be another step for Julian to play on the road as a Big Ten opponent. And this is a legit team. They should score points. Anxious to see how they match up against this Ohio State defense because they're very well balanced with a quarterback that, he's really. We had him in the Sun Bowl last year with one of his first starts, and Coach Fish just raved about what he will be, and he's been right about that.
What makes Damon Williams special in your eyes? I heard somebody in one of their games this year compare him to Jaden Daniels, which is a big comparison given what he's done. But I do see a little bit of that game. What stands out about the quarterback?
He reminds me, what's his name? The Arizona Cardinals quarterback. That's who he reminds me of. He's a little bit bigger, but you never have an angle on him when he scrambles. He seems to be able to outrun you. Or if you're even with him, you can give him a two-way go. He can juke you. But I know what Coach loves about him. He's very coachable. He was offered a scholarship in 7th grade at came to a camp at Arizona, was offered real early in his career. He just plays beyond his years. Nobody's perfect, but he does seem to have every aspect of the game and a comfort with playing quarterback. He really is a quarterback. He's not an athlete. He's a quarterback who's athletic. And, Jaden Daniels had that, but Jaden Daniels was 6'5". This guy's a little smaller, but maybe even harder to tackle because of that height.
You mentioned.
I think the real key is, just like last year, besides quarterback, those inside tackles for Ohio State last year, those push from inside, that's what really changed. And that's where Matt Patricia, I think, is going to attack this Washington offense. He needs to, either through stunts, linebacker plays, safety fills, they're going to have to attack that pocket from inside out.
You mentioned Jedd Fisch, and obviously he's a guy who's been around, as you said. But you talked about his ability. What stands out when you talk to him? Why do you like him as a coach and think this is the spot for him?
Yeah, I think it's a spot because he can attract big players at Washington. You can always go find receivers and quarterbacks, but getting the big guys is the real trick. And Washington has always been able to find players, the Samoan connection, the Hawaii connection. The West Coast is right now, they're not all going to go to USC. Because of the NIL, you can find players to fill in that you need. And I think it's a really legitimate, and I think they will be a contender. Where Jedd is good is his experience at big colleges, at Michigan, at UCLA, but also his NFL experience. So he sells his players that we are running an NFL training camp. We are getting you ready for what you want to be, an NFL football player. And that's what most everybody's selling right now. Jedd's credentials are really good with that. Nick Saban rode that style and that recruiting thing for 25 years. Jedd might not have the same amount of time or the perfect spot, but he is really good at setting up a pro practice schedule.
Last thing for you, and more of a big picture college football question this season, but outside of maybe the top ranked teams right now, is there a team you've seen that maybe could be a team that either gets in the playoff or maybe makes a run in the playoff that people aren't maybe talking about at this point in the season, but you like what you've seen on film?
I'm kind of zeroed in on my film a little bit, but who I think is a little bit of a sleeper. I think Georgia Tech is a sleeper. They can get in a game if they stay healthy at quarterback. I think South Florida is a legitimate, if they win the American and get in the playoffs, they're a real strongly built football team. They are not tricking you. They have an Alex Golish, the former Tennessee offensive coordinator, has built and acquired a lot of talent over 3 years. In the right circumstances, they'll give anybody a lot of trouble.
All right, Gary. Well, thank you very much. That was informative and fun. I hope to run into you out there on Saturday at Washington and have a good call for the game. I appreciate you.
All right. Make sure you train your eyes on the field, not all the surroundings are there.
All right. Sounds good.
Take care.
All right. Thanks again to Gary Danielson for coming on. I know he is busy this week getting ready for this game. When we were setting up this interview, there were other interviews that were coming up either before or after. So appreciate him taking time to do that. I thought he gave us some good, different perspective than what I or Kim Grinolds, could give from either side of things. I'll wrap this up now by just sort of breaking down what I see from this game. And we covered some of it already with both of the guests, but I think, look, the challenge of going on the road for the first time is always interesting. I even think back to last year and, Ohio State, this veteran team, a lot of experience, all that stuff. Still going to Michigan State. There was a lot of talk heading into that game, that first Big Ten road game, about going on the road for the first time, right? And I remember talking to people in the program off the record that, is this real? Are you really concerned about this? And it's like, concern's not the major word. Michigan State wasn't a great team at the time, and the Buckeyes felt confident that they would handle things. But still, it's different. That first time traveling away from home, you're used to doing things one way. And so I think that all plays into it. And then you're going to a place like Husky Stadium. You heard Kim talk about the atmosphere and how loud it gets out there and all that. And look, the Buckeyes have played in loud atmospheres before. Ryan Day talked about it. The big one is Julian Sayin, as Kim brought up. How does he handle that atmosphere? But you look across the offense, there's actually a decent amount of guys who have participated in games on the road in big time atmospheres. You start in the backfield with CJ Donaldson, obviously playing at West Virginia. He's been around the Big 12 the last few years. James Peoples, not so much. Bo Jackson, not so much. But I think you feel good about CJ Donaldson and helping to be able to calm things down. Similar with Carnell Tate, Jeremiah Smith, both of those guys obviously have played in big atmospheres, specifically last year at Penn State. at Oregon. So they have gone through that. This offensive line, Austin Sierreveld, Carson Hinsman, Tegra Shabola, even Philip Daniels has started 4 Big Ten games before he got to Ohio State. Ethan Onyanwa at Rice, they played at some big-time stadiums. Luke Montgomery may not have played in a true road atmosphere, or at least started in a true road atmosphere at this point, but he played in some big-time games in the national championship, right? And that's going to be when the offense is on the field, when it's loud in there, how they handle that. For the defense, it'll actually probably be a little bit easier because things will be quiet when they are out on the field. But those guys are still doing this all for the first time. A lot of them, at least, outside of the returning guys. So still a bit of a challenge. And I think how specifically Julian Sayin, but everybody kind of overcomes that will be key. I wrote this story about Julian Sayin this week. You can read it on Bucknuts, sort of about his development as a quarterback. And one of the things that kept coming up was poise, just this composure that he has, right? And I think that he will be able to handle this situation just fine, and it won't get rattled. But this is the first time we've seen it. High school, he was playing in big, somewhat big stadiums in Southern California, but nothing like what he's going to see on Saturday. So this will be a major challenge for him to just kind of see his demeanor, especially if things go wrong. Like, how do you handle it? That crowd really gets going and things like that. And on the defensive side, I think just not letting the crowd get into it as much. If you can prevent some of the big plays that Damon Williams can make, or the running back, the receivers that Kim was talking about, that's going to be key to just keeping that crowd at bay, keeping the noise at a minimum as much as possible. I'm really interested to just kind of get a vibe check on both these teams. Where are they? Like, we know Ohio State beat Texas week 1. Since then, things have gone pretty well. But still, this, I think, will be a different kind of test to give us a sense of sort of where the Buckeyes stand now, coming out of the off week and going into the Big Ten schedule. And then for Washington, I've watched all 3 of their games, and on the film it looks good, right? Like, but you're not playing the opponent that you're playing on Saturday. It's been a relatively easy stretch for them to start the season. You open with Colorado State. There were some struggles in there. I believe they were tied at halftime, but figured out, blow out UC Davis, and then Washington State. That game was close in the fourth quarter. So, is this offense as elite as it looks, as the numbers suggest? How good are some of those guys? I think we're going to find out. And then Washington's defense has given up some points, given up some yards. So I think there's opportunity there if Julian Sayin is the quarterback that can manage this atmosphere. I think that, there are opportunities to make plays. We talked about the big cornerbacks for Washington. I do think that's a bit of a challenge for Carnell Tate and Jeremiah Smith. Not one that I don't think they can't pass, but does that open up an opportunity for Brandon Inniss, we haven't seen much of, or these tight ends, Max Clare, who caught his first touchdown in the last game, but hasn't been hugely involved in the offense, at least from a statistical standpoint. Defensively, if Washington is as good as the numbers suggest and as it's looked on the film against lesser defenses, how do you handle some of this stuff? Damon Williams, he's going to make a few plays. There's no doubt about that. I think, he's not just a runner. He's not just a thrower. He can do both. He's an efficient passer. He's got a good arm. He certainly has great legs. So getting off the field will be crucial for them on defense, and keeping him in the pocket and not allowing him to when the pressure comes, escape, things like that. I was just recently watching back the Indiana-Illinois game because I didn't get a chance to watch that closely on Saturday. And one of the things Indiana did a great job of was, pressure that made Luke Altmaier, the Illinois quarterback, unable to get out of the pocket. And I think if you hold your running lanes, as they always say, that makes it more difficult. I think pressure up the middle makes it more difficult. Can Ohio State generate that? Because they haven't had a ton of that so far this year. Covering Denzel Boston on the outside is going to be a challenge. I'll be interested to see how the Buckeyes handle that. Do they travel? Do they have a cornerback travel with him? That's not something you see very often in college, but he's a big kid. And Davison Igbinosun You might want that matchup as much as possible. Obviously, Washington the other way. He's a guy, he's not just big. He's fast. He's a good route runner. So certainly some challenges here. I do think when we're talking about Damon Williams, I think Arvell Reese as a spy is really interesting. And you can use Sonny Styles too, but I think they'll use more Arvell Reese. It does take away some of what he can do as a pass rusher because he's been so good at that. But I think you would trade that off if you're keeping Damon Williams from really getting out of the pocket and getting those big plays. But when you play quarterback like that, not only can he run for positive yards, he can move, keep his eyes downfield, and throw. So you may have to cover longer than you're used to. But this is a game I think we'll get to see some more from Matt Patricia and kind of what he's got schemed up. Obviously, week 1 against Texas, they threw a lot at Arch Manning. Now what do you have ready for this? And Matt Patricia, Jed Fish, those are guys that were in the NFL. They know each other from different staffs. Jed Fish, I believe, was even on a Patriots staff, though I don't think Matt Patricia was there at that time. I could be wrong. But there is familiarity is my point. This is an offense that looks a lot like some offenses in the NFL. Jed Fish was on the Rams staff. He does a lot of what Sean McVay does down there. Matt Patricia also friends with Sean McVay. So nothing will surprise them in terms of scheme, but just what can Matt Patricia do to throw things off? I thought they did a really good job week 1 of looking one way pre-snap and then moving into something else post-snap. We had Tyvis Powell on a couple weeks ago talking about that on the happy hour. And so if you can confuse Arch Manning, you should be able to confuse a guy like Damon Williams. No offense to him. But that, at least coming into the season, our expectations were that Arch Manning was going to be one of the best quarterbacks in the country. Maybe we got that wrong. Maybe I don't want to say maybe the media got that wrong. But I still think that if you're able to confuse a guy like that, both young quarterbacks, inexperienced quarterbacks, I think some of that stuff, especially if it looks different than what you showed on film in that Texas game, you do it in different ways. Okay, now you start confusing him. Maybe you can get some turnovers, 3rd and longs, things like that. But I mean, the biggest thing is getting off the field, like I said earlier. If you're that defense, if you allow Damon Williams, especially if you get him to 3rd down and then you allow him to pick it up one way or the other, that starts to become demoralizing. The crowd builds, the momentum builds, all that. So the Buckeyes need to be good at getting off the field on 3rd down. I think we'll have our score predictions out on Friday on Bucknuts, but headline that you'll read Saturday night, Sunday morning, I think will be, along the lines of Buckeyes past difficult test. I think Ohio State can win this game. I don't think that the challenge of even like last year, Oregon, I don't think it's as big as that. I don't think it's as big as Texas, but there will be some obstacles, especially for some of the younger guys that are going to play in this game. So they may have to, survive it or fight harder than maybe they would have if this were last year's team with the experience and whatnot. But I do think the Buckeyes will come out, go to 4-0, end the win streak out at Washington. Wouldn't be surprising to me if we go into the 4th quarter and it's really close. And then, the Buckeyes can make some plays down the stretch or things like that. I do think it'll come down to a couple plays here or there for the Buckeyes that they're able to make that maybe Washington just quite isn't. I think it'll be something along the lines of Buckeyes pass, tough test on the road in Big Ten opener is the headline you will read on Saturday night, Sunday morning. I want to thank both guests for coming on again today. Kim Grinolds from Dawgman. Again, check out their work over there. They've had some good stuff this week as we build into this game. If you kind of want to see things from the Washington perspective, I will highlight that Julian Sayin story I did, put a lot of work into that. So if you're interested in kind of how Julian Sayin came to be not just the Ohio State quarterback, but the quarterback he is today, please check that out and let me know what you thought. And then again, to Gary Danielson, again, someone I think we've all listened to for years, calling college games, and I thought he added some really good insight. Anyway, Buckeye fans, if you're out in Washington, you see Steve and I out there, feel free to come say hi. We will be out and about. I've got my fiance, as I mentioned, and some friends going out. So excited for this trip. I've never been to Seattle before. Obviously never been to Husky Stadium. And I think Steve's only ever been there once. So should be exciting for exciting trip. And yeah, we're gonna see how this goes for the first Buckeye Big Ten game, first Buckeye road test. Cheers, Buckeye fans.